we have the distinct honor tonight to welcome back, after what feels like eons, JungleJuice back to the pod. Everybody, before we
Nice to meet
jump
you
into
guys.
this, nice to meet you. Nice. Let's see. We'll gotta make a camera adjustment in a second. But before we officially get started here, 100 Talkers, we've been waiting to do this for a long time. As you guys know, that roster, that sweet roster that Joe put together for us, it took a little bit of doing to get that announcement made, but now that it's out, we have him here. We've done it. He's here. Welcome back to the podcast, JungleJuice. We should probably list your many accomplishments in some way here. You've held like
the show we can dedicate to that, and then we'll move on to the interview in the second hour.
Yeah, right. You've held many titles during your time at 100T, and most recent. I mean, you started off. What were you like, head of scouting? Is that what your first title was? What was it?
No, I was like the academy head coach, I think the first year.
Well, I mean, I remember you being the academy head coach. Yeah, but everything. What haven't you done?
I think I've pretty much done everything at this point. Yeah.
One of our past videos, we had you as strategic consultant or something. There's like maybe that was a
strategic wizard of some kind.
Yeah. I think I was just the strategic coach for LCS.
You're just making up your own titles as you go.
Yeah. I was honestly making up a lot of titles for LinkedIn at that point. So.
Good. Then we're just gonna call you very necessary man. And now you've climbed all the way up to GM. Now, I'll set the stage by saying this. PapaSmithy was a very beloved figure among the fans, and it was sad to see him go. And I feel like there was virtually nobody that it would have been like, okay, cool. Yeah, we got a great new GM. Except the one person who actually got the job. I thought that was so cool just to see it come full circle for you. I know we are super excited about that. And I don't think we are alone in that. So everybody, like even us announcing this podcast, like, hey, JungleJuice is coming on. Everybody's super hyped. So it feels nice to have like one of the true guys there, right? From the beginning.
Yeah.
Been working for 100 Thieves longer than our dear friend Ssumday worked for 100 Thieves. That's how long this guy has been around. Wow. But so we appreciate you taking the time to join us from the T1 facility. I see a little T1 win on the chair behind you. We can deface that later to have the proper team name on. But welcome. Not your first run through 100 Talk. So we'll just go ahead and jump right into some questions for you. And we want to talk about first just how everything, ended with Worlds. It's now been a couple months. We had like a great run, 3 splits going to LCS finals, winning one of them. We made Worlds in both years. This year in particular was a weird one, right? NA, EU, basically anyone who's not LPL or LCK had a rough go of Worlds. A ton of 1-5 performances, and a little bit of sadness for not pushing to the heights that we were kind of hoping for. So with that dark and gloomy background, now that you've had a couple, now that you've had a couple of months to kind of like parse it, what were some of your takeaways from that experience of seeing the guys go through it, and what lessons you learned along the way? And now with like, pretty awesome roster, trying to make it back to Worlds, I assume, is the goal. Like, what are you going to do with this team differently as a result of your experience this year?
Yeah, I think the first thing when it comes to fan expectations around international performance, there's just like clear disadvantages that we as a region face. I think the most obvious one is just like player-based differences. Like when you have so many more players playing on the solo queue server in some of these eastern regions, like there's just going to be so much more variance when it comes to player skill. And I think a lot of it is them just like playing higher competitive games like throughout every point of their practice, whether it's like scrims or solo queue. So the way the game was changed this year was a lot of it was around like Dragon Soul and just Dragon team fights in general.
Yeah.
And these Eastern teams are going to have a lot more experience when it comes to these Dragon fights, and each individual player like playing at their maximum limit when they're able to practice that a lot more in solo queue. When it comes to like laning, I think there's just been a lot of like informational material out there, so I don't think that was as big of a problem as the team fighting. So I think we'll structure our practice a little bit differently this year so that we can like kind of close those gaps. But these are just like very real systematic differences that we as a region face, and we'll probably continue to face.
Yeah.
So figuring out how to like close that gap, whether that's supplementing it through additional staff or supplementing it through different ways of practice, is constantly new things that we're trying to configure and set out so that we can actually compete. Obviously, it's still very difficult. So the main takeaway for me this year was when we first entered the LCS, right? We just wanted to like hoist the trophy. That was like our only goal. And I know we get memed for being like a hoodie org, but our leadership team cares about winning. Like that's first and foremost as an esports program. Like all we want to do is win. And something weird that we really noticed was that like we felt like we were doing right by the community. We had 3 back-to-back finals. We even won a championship, and we didn't really feel like the fans like stood behind us, right? Like every single time I was in an arena for the finals, they would be like representing 100 Thieves, and like the crowd would kind of chant. And then whenever the other team came on, it was just like the entire stadium was just roaring. So we took a look at that, and we were just like, what is going wrong? And I think the largest thing is just redefining success a little bit. While we're still like prioritizing winning, we're still prioritizing performance. We're looking at esports more as a whole, like specifically the League of Legends, and it's just like, what does success look like? And I think that's like really putting the camera more on players. And we don't want to like jeopardize the players' performance by like making them just like content deliverable machines. But we do want to incentivize and put more of an emphasis on, how can we create and garner more of a community and more of an audience from our players. I think the biggest like success case I've seen from that is like Evil Geniuses, where you just have like Vulcan Inspired just like having like these normal, very candid conversations like online for fans to engage with. And when you have an engaged audience, when you have an engaged community, that's like what makes esports as a business successful, right? Like we are like really truly nothing without the community and without the fans. So having our players do that more like regularly, having them stream more, that's like the effort that we can kind of deliver on from the player standpoint. And when we actually like deliver an engaged audience, I think that's when our socials and content team is like much more incentivized to push out the content deliverables that a lot of our fans were pretty disappointed with last year. So key takeaways for me there is just like success is still winning, but success is also building a player and roster brand that fans can really like, identify with and support. So that when we do go to this stadium again, hopefully for a finals sometime this year, like you have the entire crowd like supporting 100 Thieves. Like that's kind of the vision that we're trying to set out for.
Yeah, I'll say on the pod, Jordan and I had been pulling out our hair trying to figure out what was happening because we kind of felt the same way about LCS finals. Where it's like, why is like everybody cheering for EG? Like I couldn't understand. And when we went to Atlanta for World Semifinals, and we were taking a look around at like which teams from NA are represented well. 100 Thieves was like way better represented than basically everybody but C9. Wouldn't you say, Jordan? It was like C9 and 100T jerseys everywhere. We only saw like 3 or 4 of the nasty green EG jerseys. So it's been confounding to me to see that happen. Yet I still think I agree with your take on this, that it's like, yeah, providing that, that more direct connection to the community is going to be key. I mean, and you went right into I think one of the most important topics for everybody else who's listening to this. I know Jordan and I, we tend to be more interested in like the esports side and the operations side and everything. But clearly, if there has been a sticking point for fans, over the past few months, it's been the content plan, right? Like everybody feeling like, what are we doing with content? We have this great roster with cool personalities and little content to support that. So, I was joking to Jordan, if 100 Thieves fan, like your average fan, came onto this podcast to ask you one question, there's like a 99% chance that it would be about that.
Yeah.
So, is there anything like, so can you talk a little bit more specifically about what you're planning to do in 2023 that will provide that? I mean, clearly we've got some big personalities coming onto the team. And I think that mix is going to be super interesting. Without it being captured, it's nothing, you know? So, if you're able to give us some information about like some of the plans you're doing and how you want to forge that connection, I'd love to dig into that a bit.
Yeah, so I think at the start of the year, we generally have like an onboarding slash, general presentation that we provide to all of our players with, various members within our organization, whether that's like HR and payroll, or our coaches, or or like 1HP, which is like the performance organization that we're partnered with.
Yeah.
And I think in addition to that, it'll be like our social and content team this year, and adding that really as like a pillar of what success looks like. So just giving the players more direction on like this is like key to succeeding as a pro this year, or just succeeding as a personality working in the entertainment industry, and just giving them guidelines on what to do. So I think those guidelines kind of look like the players putting more of an effort just regularly, like I said, just interacting with their community more on Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, just whatever social networks that they have. And I think again, it's like we do not want to jeopardize performance, right? So
Yeah, that's what I was going to
things
ask.
that we're planning on. Yeah. So I think in terms of long form content, that is really when it starts jeopardizing performance, because we're taking out like so much of the players' times to trying to capture these content pieces that are really, really long form. And it's not just something that you've noticed in League of Legends or just specifically esports. It's just like all around the world, short form is kind of dominating like the vertical short form content. Um, so that is kind of more of the content deliverables that we're looking at, to delivering, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, um, content in that category. So specific like things that we're looking to do more often. I think Mic Check has always been super successful.
Yeah.
So we'll be looking to continue those series. Um, and we'll just have the players streaming more regularly. I think throughout the week, we have our like scrim schedule, and we have like blocks, right? So it's like you have your first scrim block, 3 games, second block, 3 games, and then we sometimes have a third block. Some of these third blocks this year will just be dedicated to players playing Champions Queue on stream. So fans will have an opportunity to, interact with the players directly on stream. And then we'll also be capturing that content to create, just kind of like when you see streamers have like their YouTube channels, right? It's like you have an editor going onto those channels, reviewing the stream, just capturing the best moments and like kind of creating like a storyline for a specific video or a specific content piece. That's kind of what we're looking to do. So, anything that doesn't require too much of a lift from the player standpoint, so it doesn't feel like they're just content deliverable machines, but something that like works like cohesively with their practice schedules, and also gives a lot more platforms for fans and like community to engage with them. That's kind of like the ideal goal.
I don't know if you can say more about this, so just let us know if not. But is part of the plan to actually provide the team with the resources that make it easier to put content out there? So, having people who are going to be editing stuff from those streams, or like how is that going to work for the people who are on the team? If it's something you can talk about.
Yeah, so we have specific like people on our content team that is in charge of like socials. So they're like assisting players with like what is and isn't okay to tweet, obviously, but just like guidelines on like, like just be yourself, right? Like be a personality that the players will stand behind. And then when it comes to like TikTok, we have like a whole process of like, here's an idea that we have, probably some like thirst traps involving Milan, like how do we get that like approved, and then how do we like shoot that, how do we edit that from like start to finish, and then get that uploaded onto our TikTok channel, stuff like that.
Yeah,
we're like kind of like starting those processes in place. And even in like this Korean bootcamp that we're doing at T1, we had a lot of content ideas. Unfortunately, we had our videographer like catch COVID pre-flight, so they're unable to join us, but we are really making an effort. And yeah, and we are really making an effort, and it is something that we really want to deliver on. So it's not something that we're trying to hide. Like we are very conscious of the fact that content just as a whole we didn't really do right by the community, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll be seeing increased efforts both internally from our organization and from the players as well to kind of give the fans like a roster that they'll, stand and support.
Yeah, I
That's
think
cool. Yeah.
it'll be interesting to watch how you guys hit that balance. I know the people who are listening that are like 100 Talk people, they will certainly be saddened to hear that less of the focus is on the longer form content. I know everybody in the world loved the heist, but the heist is not always like doable, right? And plus, I think there's kind of like a content meta also, right? And maybe docuseries are not not meta right now as far as resources are concerned and eyeballs are concerned. So it's a huge challenge. And then you also have to think about some of these people that you've got on your player roster, right? We're not dealing with vanilla players at all.
Yeah.
We're dealing with a couple of very large names, a couple of very like hyped rookies, couple of which have some personality as well. So how do you guys think about that? Because clearly you're showing that you recognize the importance of them having a brand and them streaming, right, and making that part of the plan. How do you contextualize that within 100 Thieves as a whole? Like, what are you, how, like, Doublelift, Bjergsen, Tenacity, whoever streaming more? What are you hoping like that generates for you guys when, as far as the fans are concerned? Obviously, you want a connection, but like more materially, what are you looking for to make that actually like part of your strategy?
I think just logistically, like figuring out how we can like fit it into our practice schedule, so it doesn't like impede them actually becoming performers.
Yeah.
That's like first and foremost. So again, like we're optimizing for performance here. I think once they just like stream more regularly, like more eyes will be on them. Because I think we just want to like document their journey as pros, right, in whatever ways possible. So I think just like to answer that question as like short as possible, it's just like having them more out there, whether that's through streaming or whether that's through tweeting, or whether that's just like being on Reddit or whatever social platform. It's just them being more out there so that fans and the community can have more access to our players.
I got to say, huge fan of the heist. Obviously, it's one of the things that brought me in as a fan early on. I've been watching more Doublelift since he joined the team, and I think his stuff is really good, and it provides a lot of the same kind of thoughts of the player, how things are going. So it will be interesting to see, how that fits in, because a lot of times what people want with the long form stuff is they want to know the story, what's going on, how are people doing. My sense is those kinds of that kind of content it won't be hard to get that from the roster we've got. So it'll be really interesting to see kind of how that continues to evolve as people get busier, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, there's always things that like players and we can and can't share.
Mm-hmm.
Like we obviously want to share as much as possible, but there's always going to be things that we can't really speak on. But even if you like see Doublelift streams, right? Like he's doing like vlogs of like his journey in Korea, vlogs of like why he joined 100 Thieves, and I think things like that will just like happen very very naturally without like us setting it out as an agenda, right? Like if you're on stream and you have like people tuning into your stream, like those are questions that your viewers are just going to ask, and those questions are just going to get answered very naturally. Players like talking about their performance as a team, those are things that are going to be tweeted very very naturally. So I don't think it really has to be a forced agenda, as long as we like cultivate a culture where like players are more open to discussing those things with their community. I think all of those things will just happen naturally, and it doesn't really need to be like we're shooting a 30-minute video talking about like how practice was like this week.
Right.
Like
You don't need
fans
to
will
sit
just
people
get that.
down for an interview to say,
Yeah.
tell us about how you feel. It's just going to be out there.
Yeah, it's just gonna be out there. So we want it to happen very naturally. We just want to cultivate a culture where like players know that that's like what success looks like, and that's like the new standards of what being, just an entertainer in this space. I think understanding that, I think it will just happen very naturally for the fans.
All right, man. I can't resist. I gotta say it. I just gotta say it. Do you have any concern about like being that loose with it? If your players are streaming, I'm thinking of one player in particular who may be a part of the bot lane who is very vocal about things, and he will speak his mind very directly. There's,
Come on, Lucio, Cole.
you're obviously letting some control go as far as the messaging. Do you have any concerns about that, or like what's giving you the feeling that, hey, you know what, this is totally fine, this is good, we don't have to worry about that? Or do you have concerns? Like what? I just have to ask, because it just seems like, all right, Doublelift, go on stream, have fun, talk to the people, they ask you questions, you can answer them. It's just like, okay, all right. I know there are a lot of people in chat who are going to be, throwing questions his way, hoping for candid answers.
I don't typically do this, but Joe, can I offer a bit of additional context to this?
Okay.
I will just say, Doublelift is no stranger to situations that a lot of people want to know behind the scenes details on. I think he's done an admirable job about not getting into those details until after. Like, he's talked more about TSM in the last couple of weeks than he did during. So I just got to put that out there. But then I'll pass that question to you, Joe.
Yeah, I think just us as a company, we never want to force someone to do something without them really understanding why we're doing it, right? Like, if a player comes to me and says why can't I talk about this, there should be a very clear reason as to why that wouldn't be a good idea. And when it comes to content and just giving them more of a platform, a lot of it is built on trust and having principles or guidelines that we're all agreeing on, right? And I think we have a lot of faith in our players to carry themselves out as professionals, to represent 100 Thieves as a brand. So yeah, a lot of that connection is built on trust. So I know for Peter, he's already done a couple of vlogs where he speaks about his entire process of why he joined 100 Thieves, right?
Yeah.
And I think we've already seen him taper some of those conversations around things that he really couldn't talk about, and he was very freely openly willing to talk about why he joined 100 Thieves and releasing information that he was comfortable releasing. So again, a lot of it is built on trust. A lot of it is just trusting these guys as adults that understand that they're also representing the brand. So we know that we're giving the players a lot more freedom, but that's kind of the double-edged sword that you kind of have to be willing to take when it comes to giving fans as close to the true story as possible, without releasing confidential details.
Yeah.
So they are definitely I guess measurements we have in place, but we're definitely going to start off this process with we have full faith. Here are some guidelines. Here are some rules. But as long as we stick within these boundaries, we're very, I guess, aligned on what that success looks like.
Yeah. That's good. I mean, my mind gets called back to days I'm sure you'll remember of having Medios on the team first go round, when narrative kind of got out of control for the org, from one of the players, honestly. So it's interesting to come full circle and be like, no, I think, I don't know. I think Jordan and I as fans, we kind of learned that people who have been in the space longer than us, because we've only been watching basically as long as 100 Thieves has been around, they feel very, very attached to the players and very, very aligned with the players' incentives, and all their motivations and stuff. And so there was always this demand to be transparent. We want the truth. We don't want the canned PR answers. We don't want the sit down video where you come up with whatever prepared statement. So it's really interesting to see the growth of 100T into a strategy that embraces more candidness, candidicity, whatever it is, you guys know what I'm saying. It's really interesting to see it evolve to that. And I think from a fan perspective, this started because we were talking about your guys' observations about fans being on your side or not. I think this is a strategy that the fans would definitely be excited for. I think a lot of roller coastering of the story of this season is going to happen from this, and so it'll be a fun ride, and I hope everybody has their safety bars down for it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about you as a GM now that you're moving into this position. Obviously you had a few seasons to watch Chris perform this role. And, you know, again, like I said, he was a beloved figure to fans and everything. So I know a lot of us are curious as to what you're going to do in a similar manner as him and what you're going to do differently from him. So PapaSmithy is one guy, one approach. It obviously, you know, we did well as an org with him at the controls there. So what are you going to incorporate? What are you going to do differently? And how do you view yourself as like a successor to what he helped you build? I mean, you were there with him. It's not like he did this without you, but now that you're at the controls, what are you thinking?
I think when it comes to roster construction, I think you always have to be willing to take risks to do something great. Like I look at EG and like everyone is like praising them for the rise of JoJo and I guess like a similar extent Danny. But those were very, very risky moves, right? Like I believe there were rumors about like them being able to pick up Jensen, right? And you know, if you're any organization and you're looking at the option of fielding JoJo versus Jensen, and you want like to secure worlds or secure a top place in the league, it is a very risky move to just field a rookie out there. And something that we've learned is when you want to field rookies into your roster, the first thing is like they actually have to be ready. Like we've seen a lot of like LCS rookies just thrown into the LCS because it looks great for optics, but they're just candidly not ready. Like they didn't have a year of amateur, they didn't have a year of academy to actually develop like the fundamental like learnings to like for them to become LCS ready players. But at the same time, you need to be in a competition level where you are facing higher level opponents so that you can actually like be at the same playing field as the best pros in North America, right? So when it comes to fielding rookies, I think what we've learned is we want to start those rookies out in spring. We want to give them the full entire year to kind of, you know, really explore their like ceilings as players. And one thing we're really committed to is like we're not really big fans or just in general like making roster changes in the middle of a split. Like we don't think that's real. When you set out a roster from the beginning, right, you're like committed to these 5 players. And it's kind of like a ride or die situation. Like you're always going to face hurdles as a team. And you kind of have to be willing to work through those hurdles, or it's like, why field these rookies in the first place? Like if you go through a couple of weeks and you see the rookie struggling, like why did you field that rookie in the first place? Right? Like these are kind of the challenges that you kind of have to expect when you start with these players. And that's the kind of the commitment that we're going to show every single player on our roster. So I think main differences is taking more of a risk. Like we definitely had options to start our rookies in previous years, right? Like we've always had like Kenvi, Tenacity, these like really great players that have started in the LCS in recent times. And I think this is the first time where you're seeing from us. We've spent so many years developing talent in amateur and academy, and they're finally going to be starting for us. And we're super, super excited about that. And yeah, I think the biggest difference is I also love North America. I also love the idea of development. But it's never going to be about like the optics press, or at least for me, it's going to be like tailored around performance. And the reason we paired up, you know, Boosie and Tenacity with, you know, veterans like Peter and Bjergsen is because they just bring like a championship aura to the team. Like we know that they're going to perform. And you look at Busio like right now and a year from now, right? And it's like, where would Busio be with like another rookie paired with him or someone that's in the bottom of LCS and A carry, right? It's just like a very completely different player by the end of the year. So even before this offseason, you know, with the financial thing that like Sean and Jacob talked about, Jacob and I always joked about like, wow, wouldn't it be great if Busio could play with double lift? So for us to see that like happen,
for example,
in reality is just absolutely crazy to us, like that we were actually able to pull this off. But yeah, just figuring out ways to guarantee the success of development, right? Like development only happens on winning teams. Like you can say like your culture is crazy, that your coaching philosophy is like always long term, but if your team is not winning, development is super hard, right? Like there's not a lot of development happening. So Again, prioritizing performance, and if we do field rookies, we're putting them in an environment with experienced staff, experienced players, and all the resources that they need to actually succeed.
Okay,
I think.
I gotta ask
Go
a
ahead.
follow-up question to that piece, which is, you know, it's no secret that Doublelift very excited to play with Busio. You know, oh hey,
Oh, who's that handsome devil back there?
What do you think about working with Bjergsen?
Yeah, what do you think? Is it true? Are the rumors of how nightmarish he is true?
he probably can't hear us.
Oh, he can't hear. He kept it
Sorry,
quiet.
go ahead.
The cameo is concluded. I was gonna say, you talked about Champions Queue, how it's part of the overall strategy and kind of plan for the team this year. Like it's going to have a specific role to play. Curious, one, just kind of in general, your thoughts on it. I know it's kind of a new thing that we're trying as a region, but then also my sense is it's that environment that gave Doublelift enough exposure to Busio to know that he was somebody he wanted to play with, that he thinks very highly of. So is there anything that you can say about kind of the benefit of having that environment where pros get to kind of play in a little bit more of a competitively sound environment with people? Like, has that helped to identify who real, true, talented prospects are for you guys?
I think it's definitely mixed.
Yeah.
So Champions Queue is definitely like initiative that's in the right direction. Like when a player is playing on 60 ping in solo queue and then going back to like 0 to 10 ping for scrims on stage is obviously not ideal because you want to keep the conditions as consistently throughout all forms of practice. But one thing that we've definitely noticed is that like, okay, so like when I was climbing the ladder, right, and I was trying to be a challenger player or I was trying to be pro, I was obviously not good enough. But one of the biggest like factors in like trying was like I got to play with other streamers that were streaming on League of Legends, and I got to actually play with the pros, and that was such a huge incentive for a lot of these like younger players that want to go pro, right? Like being in your first game with Bjergsen, being in your first game with LCS pros was such an awesome experience. And what happens when you take all of the NA LCS pros, all of the NA Academy players, like the best players in the region, and you put them into a server where our solo queue players don't have access to, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think trying to bridge that gap is like the next step of making Champions Queue the product it needs to be like a complete success.
Interesting.
Because what I would want to see is like I would want to see young players aspiring to becoming pro, climbing the North American ladder, and then having a more seamless entry into Champions Queue, right? Because like if Champions Queue stays the way it is going to be a good practice environment for all of our current pros.
Mm-hmm.
But think about the quality of all future pros, like years down the line, right? You're obviously going to see deterioration in that. So I know Riot is like figuring out solutions for this. But yeah, in the short term, it's great. Like we have a server where like they're close to 0 to 10 ping, and they have like voice comms available all set up by Riot. So I think it's definitely a great initiative. And there's some long-term pitfalls that we're very aware of, but I think Riot's very aware of all of those things and working through how we can make Champions Queue like a long-term success as a product.
Yeah, now all this talk about development, I mean, we need to dig into this a bit more too. I mean, I know you made a Reddit post where you kind of dumped some of your thoughts about like amateur and academy and all that, right? Our talent pipeline for the past few years has been extremely productive. So 100 Next, I don't think it's a stretch to say 100 Next is the most successful NA amateur project of all time, right? Just look at the conversion rate of those guys. And they're all like beloved figures, right? Like you've got 4 people that are going to be starting and everybody knows that it should be 5. And then, the academy program, no slouch either, right? Converting lots of academy players and prospects into starters. Now in this current environment, like how are you guys going to tweak the approach when it comes to academy, when it comes to development, given all of the current things that are happening in the industry? Like how are you guys going to keep up that momentum for development? You've done an excellent job so far, and it would be a shame to fall off, so to speak.
So I think this is like kind of the difference, right? It's like every amateur program has like a different goal. Like you look at TSM's academy roster, and people are saying like, what does this academy roster do? Or like a lot of fans were disappointed, right? And like every organization is going to have a very, very different like a goal setting or KPI for what academy is going to do. Like Jack said very clearly, the point of our academy program is to get as many players into the LCS, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think my goals, just to be very straightforward, is it's not about the number of players that enter the LCS. It's about like the quality, right? Like we want to see players like JoJo enter the LCS, and what that really means is like super young players that go through a development pipeline and like cement themselves as like top 5 players in their role, right? Because you don't really want to see like players enter the LCS, perform like mediocre or like not that great, and then like go back to academy for the rest of their careers, right? Like we want to identify a super high ceiling players and then help them develop into like the top 5, top 3 players within North American LCS. And I think our goal was always like, we're gonna do this long-term plan, not to just like create like a farm program so that we can just like ship players off to other LCS teams. But the goal was always like, one day we want to see these guys playing under our banner. We're seeing 2 of these rookies like really truly start under our banner, right? And we want that to be like a major success. So I think in terms of our plans for amateur, I know fans are definitely disappointed. Just because we haven't been as firmly committed as previous years. But the way we see it is like we're finally reaping like all the rewards from like all the years of work that we've put into our amateur program.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure that this is a success this year. So conversations around amateur are still ongoing. We plan to potentially enter it maybe back in summer. But we know that we have like a bunch of rookies in all like every single level of our program that we're super excited about. So yeah, without disclosing more information, it's like about quality and it's about getting like top 5 players in their role in LCS.
Yeah. So when it comes to those rookies, then because we've got a couple of them starting. What are your like expectations or what timelines do you have for specifically for Tenacity and Busio? Like what to you is a successful year for them? And like how, like where as fans, as we watch these guys develop, like what are the benchmarks we're trying to see along the way? Like, okay, we hit this milestone, we hit that milestone. What should our expectations be?
Our expectations for our players are quite candidly very high. We think Closer and Bjergsen are already like top players in their role. I think Bjergsen's always been a top player in his role. I think Closer's been like a conversation for MVP candidate like almost every single split in the jungle role. So he hasn't gotten it yet, but like obviously like we think he's a great performer. So we're not really worried about those 2. Like we know that those guys are going to perform when it comes crunch time. I think the biggest question marks I had coming into this season, quite candidly, Peter, I'm sorry if you're hearing this, but it was definitely about like Peter coming back from retirement, right? And how our rookies are going to do. And I think what made us so confident in the rookies and Peter, when it comes to Peter, he's always been like a champion. Like he's just not someone that's going to settle for less. And we've been scrimming already, and I'm actually really surprised at like how much closer to Peter's old form he is than what I expected. Because I thought it was going to take some time, and it still will.
Mm-hmm.
But I know Peter has the right mindset. And then when it comes to Busio, his like growth mindset is just crazy. Like the number of hours that he puts in, like how like self-aware and critical that guy is. Like I just know that the guy's going to be a success. So my expectations for them, and this is probably their own expectation, is that they're going to be one of the best bottom lanes by summer. And for Milan, I think he's just going to have a really, really challenging split. I don't think it's because of the lack of talent or anything, but I just think top lane specifically in LCS this year is really competitive.
A little bit
you have
stacked.
Impact, you have Ssumday, you have Summit.
Ssumday.
You even have Armood coming in.
There's Ssumday.
Right? Like top lane is just stacked this year. Absolutely stacked. Oh, yeah. I forgot Fudge, but it's just stacked. So
I too forgot Fudge. Who cares?
Yeah, so he's just gonna have all the competitors needed, and he's going to just need to like meet them where they're at in terms of performance to be a competitive top laner.
Yeah.
So I think he's just set up for success there because like he's just gonna be practicing with really, really strong players throughout the year. So yeah, I think in spring, obviously the players like just have really high ambitions right out the gate, right? And I think we're gonna support those ambitions. But for us, like we're definitely looking at like peaking at summer. At least making worlds is definitely the goal there. And I'm just super excited. We're gonna give them all the time that they need. But I just think that I don't want to undersell these guys because I know that these guys' expectations for themselves is just incredibly high. So we're just gonna support those expectations and see where that takes us.
Yeah.
Yeah, Cole and I were talking about the kind of the rookies coming in once the roster was announced, I think, and we recognize it's the first time that we've had rookies joining the team at the start of a split, and I just think that's such a valuable place to be starting from. It's always before been by necessity, or we're kind of in a roster crisis that we can't quite figure out how to solve otherwise. So I, like you, am very excited and I'm kind of just excited to watch these guys develop because it's less about, is this the piece that fixes the roster issue we're having? And it's more about, can these guys reach their promise, which feels like a very different point to be starting from as a fan. And one that's a little bit less all or nothing, right? Like there's time for us to make measurable improvement. So super exciting from a fan's perspective for that too.
Yeah, I think also for rookies, like a lot of orgs are just scared of the failure. Like, what if I start this rookie and they fail, and then like they put like a veteran in academy to like basically act as like an emergency like sub in, right?
Right.
Like you look at Busio and you look at Tenacity, we are 100% bought in to them for this year. It's like we're gonna give them like all the resources that they need. And I know we had like our 6-man thing with Ssumday situation last year. And I think like obviously there was like pros and cons to that. Ssumday was obviously just performing so well.
Yeah.
That we kind of needed him to start. But like when you psychologically have like a second player that you can always fall back on, it creates this like weird dynamic where like if you face a hurdle with a player, you're not going to try as hard, right? Like you want your back against the wall. You want to have like 0 secondary options. Just do your research, do as comprehensive of a job in the off season to fully evaluate what the player's strengths and weaknesses are, and just be very cognizant of that. Be very intentional, and give players like the split that they deserve. Like that's kind of the mindset we have. So there is no backup options for these guys. Like we're very committed to seeing them succeed, and we think we've built like a very complementary program, especially in academy as well, for them to have all the resources that they need. So we're also very excited, and I'm super excited to give like Milan his like first like no strings attached.
Right.
First year, like no 6-man. Like this is your first chance at like a full opportunity at LCS. And I think that's like way better in terms of like the psychological aspect when it comes to like coaching staff for like roster decisions, and like Milan as well, right? Like I need to succeed. There is no like Ssumday to like cover up for me if like I play poorly.
Yeah, that's interesting. So first of all, I hope he's still eligible for rookie of the split, right? Like I know he played a game last year that hoping that didn't flub up the candidacy or there, because
I'm sure they'll find a way.
I think we'll have 2 candidates, right? But obviously behind him is Sniper, who everybody rates him very highly. This is guys coming down the pike. He can't play this year LCS, so we know that Tenacity is going to get his full year. But when you're talking about no backup options, it is interesting to point out though the ADC situation, right? So I know we're shifting away from rookies, but you've got Peter in there ready to go, but behind him you have the first team all-pro LEC player. So what's going on like there? Like how with Unforgiven, how is he fitting into this picture? How like is he just another one we can chalk up to like, hey, I really want to play for 100 Thieves and EU sucks? Because I'm all on board with that.
Yeah, so I think for Unforgiven, like when it comes to like Peter and Busio, obviously, like one guy's coming back from retirement and one guy's a rookie, right?
Yeah.
So internally, what is like the best practice environment that we can set up? Like I think Sniper and Milan are both like super mechanically talented players. So if we're like running one-on-one like laning drills between those guys, I think they'll like get really, really good practice, learning both sides of the matchup. And then for Unforgiven and Destiny, I think they're just going to be a really strong bottom lane. Like you could probably put those guys in LCS and they probably compete. So internally, when you have access to that, I think it just provides more resources for our bot lane to actually succeed as well in LCS. And again, it's kind of the same conversation. Like we have full faith in our players.
Yeah.
And you know, we're obviously optimizing for performance, but we're very confident in Peter and we're very confident in Busio. So, you know, I think a lot of people are going to ask questions about like what is Unforgiven's role, and although I can't comment too much on that right now, it's like things would really have to go off plan, right? There has to be like multiple things that happen when like a player promotion happens. So it's like a combination of him playing super well, or like Peter performing super poorly, or like the culture just being an absolute mess. So yeah, I can't really comment fully on like what the plans are there, but again, it's the same philosophy as I said before. It's like we did our research. We're very confident in both rosters, and you know, I think the coaching staff is going to fully support giving the players that they need to like overcome all the hurdles.
Yeah. It's quite an interesting roster construction that you were able to pull off. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining that behind one of the NA GOATs, we have the first team All Pro LEC. You know, it's like I'm not, yeah, that's a great position to find ourselves in. I'm not sad about that at all. You know, but it really is. I think considering, you know, you mentioned that video that John and Jacob did about just kind of the financial state of things and the league program, and hey guys, we're going to scale back a bit on what we're doing. And I think everybody can kind of surmise what's going on financially within the league. That's happened to a lot of the teams, with money just being like a bigger problem. You were able to pull off I'm not sure I'd go as far as say shocking roster, but it's quite better than I expected that we were going to have. Once it was like, hey, yeah, kind of we're looking elsewhere for things, you know. I'm really impressed by what you put together. So I think it's probably a very weird time to be a GM, right? And you just went through this. Yeah, eyes wide. Yes. You just went through Rostermania and what's got to be one of the craziest times ever to get things done. What was that like? I mean, the scene is like changing so quick, and honestly, like a lot of the stuff that was reported on or leaked or whatever and seemed like it was legit didn't end up going that way for a lot of like we were told virtually no one is going to spend money, but we still saw a lot of star players line up on a lot of different rosters. I mean, what is going on with Rostermania? How did you navigate that? And furthermore, how did you pull off assembling what is probably like the most interesting team in the LCS?
Yeah, so I think hopping into like the budget situation, like we knew that this was going to be like a year that we had to be more financially responsible. So it was honestly just the perfect time to promote our rookies. Like if we're not going to take a chance on our rookies this year, when like the budgets are kind of directing us to like what year are we actually going to fearlessly start our rookies, right? So like we knew that we had to commit to that. And then our next kind of step was like, what pieces are we filling out in the rest of the roster to look at these guys and build a successful roster? And it has been very different from previous seasons. Like in previous seasons, like for example, when we had the first iteration of our roster in 2021 with Demonte, right? And we upgraded to Felix. It's very easy for us to just like scout the best players. We have the money, pay them their market rate, and then just get the best players, right? It was always like first movers advantage. And the thing that you saw this year was that the prices were correcting in the entire market, right? Like some players were not aware that the market was adjusting, so they were negotiating with their old salaries, right? And those were kind of
Dude, this is exactly what I said. Jordan, you remember this on the pod? I was like, I bet a lot of players are having a rude awakening right now. Oh man.
Yeah, so it was definitely interesting having some of these conversations. And And although I think we pulled off a really cool roster, and I want to say like, oh, we just absolutely heisted and smurfed it. There's like 2 main reasons why this roster creation was possible. First one is just that our organization and brand is just so powerful. Like usually when you try to like sell a player on joining your team, you have to pay them like a really fair market price. You have to sometimes overpay market price, right? And then really sell them on the roster and then sell them on all the intangibles of the program. And players just want to join 100 Thieves just because they think we can document their journey as pros much better than other organizations. And externally, like you look at our brand, you look at our like, you know, apparel, you look at all other sectors of our business, and they can tell that it's a very like sustainable, very financially responsible company, right? So that made those conversations very easy because I don't have to like sell them on the brand. They already love the brand. And secondly, the reason why this roster was possible is just because every person on our roster was willing to make some kind of sacrifice to make this roster possible. Like you heard like Peter doing his like vlog, right? Like he had multiple other LCS offers where he was going to get paid significantly a lot more, and he chose to join us. So when you have like 5 players making those sacrifices to like make that, you know, this roster possible, it's like you're not really giving kudos to yourself, like you're giving kudos to the players and the company for creating such a strong brand to make it possible. So I'm honestly super excited, just because my first year as GM, when it was like a financially cut back year, right? It's like I want to be bought into the program that we're creating. And you know, when you don't have a roster as interesting as this, it's like hard to give that full commitment and buy-in, right? And now we're at a point where like everyone at our company is super excited, like not just esports and League of Legends, but everyone from apparel, everyone from content, everyone from like socials, content, leadership, like everyone is so excited about this roster because it's like you have Closer, who's been like the most stand-up professional on our organization that has like represent our organization like flawlessly. You have 2 of like North America's like greatest goats that
The 2
have some of the
goats,
largest
yeah.
fan.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's gotta
like
be.
literally, quite literally, the 2 biggest goats, like with the 2 most promising like talents from like development pipeline in North America, and it's like, how can you dislike this roster? Like you have to be excited about it, right? So I'm obviously very excited, and with all the changes in LCS, right? I think we're gonna really put in a large effort, not just for our own team, but just to make sure we play our part in trying to fix some of the issues that we're seeing with the LCS. A lot of it just being like trying to bring a more engaged audience back to the scene. So I think this roster accomplishes like so many check marks across the board. Obviously, it check marks like the ceiling that we have as a team performance wise, but I think in terms of content, in terms of creating brands and communities within NALCS again, we think we're going to deliver. So I'm just excited about this roster for so many different reasons, and I'm sure fans are as well.
Hey, I got to say, you said you can't take credit for kind of the roster coming together and or all the credit, but I got to say, I heard Peter say in his video that he everybody he talked to at the company just impressed him, and you know, the staff, people, the coaches behind the scenes, you know, etc. As the GM of the program, you at least get partial credit, I think, for like all of that stuff. So you might not be ready to take it yet, but that's I think that's one of the other things that comes with the GM job, right? It's like,
yeah,
this program is now kind of a reflection of the work you've done. Especially, maybe one thing if you walked in as GM 2 weeks ago, but you've been there building since day one. So you know, we appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, and actually piggybacking off of that, you know, you're, as we mentioned before, you're unique in that you are like the OG for 100 Thieves, right? You're the guy who has been there the entire time. And you've seen the program grow from like, I don't know, probably not really having that clear of a picture of what you guys want to achieve and do, all the way to now you're more experienced. You've brought home a title already. You know, you're clearly one of the favorite orgs when it comes to like numbers and fans, right? Like, you know, I know you guys are working on connecting with fans a little more this year, but clearly, you know, you're not immortals. Let's just say it like that. So what are 1 or 2 thoughts, lessons that you can share that you've learned along the way, like being on that journey all the way from, you know, 2017 until now? Like, what have you learned being on that ride?
I think it's just like every other startup culture, right? Like I think when you're working at like a larger company, people can kind of just do everything within their roles. Um, and you're just kind of like a cog in a machine, right? Like everyone just does their role and the wheel will kind of run by itself.
Hmm.
When you're working at a startup or just like kind of this industry where everyone's like super passionate, I think the reason why 100 Thieves has been so successful is like we just had so many, I guess, like visionaries that were willing to just do more than what their role required, kind of like stepping outside of those bounds, like just being super proactive. I think like my biggest like role model in the company has been like Bjergsen. Like I think he just like raised like our company to like the next level. Like he
Pour out
brought in
some
all
for
of our
Jackson.
creators.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think just like things like that where people just have really like great ideas about like what the company can become. And seeing that like, you know, put into action over the course of 5 years, like we went from like working in like a desk in like a house to like now having our own compound is like it's really surreal. And I think I really felt that like when we were doing Hall of Fame with Ssumday. Like I think Ssumday and I like kind of like took a little bit of a moment to like look back at the 5 years and we were like,
Yeah.
you know, we were just some guys like that were just really obsessed with the video game. And while we were doing all of that, like the rest of the company was like just building out this massive esports company. And now we have a compound that we can practice out of. And just really taking a moment to hone all of that in was, it was just kind of like a beautiful thing.
I'll add that you're also now sitting in the T1 compound. That's
Yeah.
probably also on the list of things that you didn't think were likely to happen when you were at a desk in a house in LA.
Yeah. So I think just like the biggest thing in the past of 5 years is like when you're on the esports side, you're so focused on like winning week to week. You're focused on practice. You're focused on performance that you kind of forget that like the rest of the company exists. And like seeing that kind of unfold and seeing that how has that all of that has like developed kind of simultaneously to how our league program has developed is super cool to see. Because you know we had our own struggles after the first year of LCS where we were going through like a couple splits of not so great performances. And seeing like Jackson smurf it super hard on his end and the rest of the team just like killing it while your league program isn't doing so well, it was always like kind of embarrassing and kind of had to put your like head down, like be kind of like shameful, right? Because like you want to like perform at the same level they're performing at. And I think when we finally won a trophy in 2021, and you know we had really good like success across all of our esports programs, like not just in League of Legends. We were kind of like able to like raise our head up high and be like, we have our place in this organization. And I think that's like kind of what makes it great. Like you kind of know that although we're growing, there are still like superstars and a lot of like key players in the organization excelling at their roles to kind of continue building 100 Thieves to what it currently is and what it can be in the future. So that's just been like the really cool, I guess, intangibles that are kind of hard to describe.
Well, dang. I don't think we I think it would be a shame to continue this conversation beyond the excellent like way you just summed everything up, because honestly, like the last thing we were going to ask you about was Ssumday entering Hall of Fame, and you know, you blended that in here. I'm sure it's been quite an interesting few months to take that in and have that look back at everything. And you know, we've felt the same way as, you know, we've been covering 100 Thieves League of Legends since virtually the beginning too. And it coming full circle and having you be in the seat that you're in right now, it's very cool. It's like things have evolved, and you know, the journey that you've been on, you've been rewarded for that. And I think, like I said, as fans, there's virtually no one that we would have been like as satisfied with to have that position. So we couldn't be happier for you to be doing that. So we definitely, first of all, thank you for being here tonight with us. We are looking forward to seeing how this boot camp goes for you guys, and seeing like, you know, what the beginning of 2023 looks like. Things are, you know, obviously different for LCS and 400 Thieves, and it's going to be a very interesting year to see what, well, I don't know what that was. I'm sorry. Was that someone moving a table over there?
that was a door. That was a door.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, wow. Lost my train of thought. But it's great to have you in the seat that you're in, and we wish you the best of luck as you take what I'm telling you. This is the most interesting roster I think that could possibly put together right now. It's like the old like Heineken most interesting man is like our roster right now. So it's full of intrigue and surprise, and I wish you guys well, and we hope to be watching us, like you said, go to Worlds. That's the goal.
Yeah.
So, all right, we will let you go. We know you're in boot camp mode / maybe even on time where you're supposed to be getting some rest. So we will let you get back to doing that. Again, thank you for being here tonight, and thanks for everybody for tuning in. We will. I don't know when the next time we'll do an LCS pod is, everybody. We'll keep you guys posted on our Twitter and Discord. We're hitting the holidays and off season a little bit, so there may be a brief break, but we'll let you guys know what's going on. In the meantime, we will say, as we always do at about this time, we love you and we miss you.